In the 12th century, a mighty Islamic empire rose from the Atlas Mountains to dominate two continents. The Almohads would build one of history's most powerful forces that stretched from Libya to Portugal. Their warriors crushed Christian armies in decisive battles that shook the foundations of medieval Europe forever. Yet this empire was founded not merely on conquest, but on a revolutionary understanding of faith itself. The Almohads championed tawhid, the absolute oneness of God, transforming this theological principle into imperial power. Their massive square minarets still tower over Marrakesh, Seville, and Rabat as monuments to their architectural genius. Philosophers like Ibn Rushd flourished under their patronage, shaping European thought for centuries to come afterward. This is the extraordinary story of the Almohad Empire, where theology and philosophy met martial prowess. If you find this documentary useful and informative, please like and subscribe to Unleash Facts today. Support our work in bringing history to life through thoroughly researched and engaging historical documentaries worldwide. In the early 1100s AD, North Africa and Iberia lay under the rule of the Almoravids. These Berber warriors had created a vast empire connecting Morocco with al-Andalus across the Mediterranean Sea. Yet by the 1120s AD, cracks had begun appearing in this once mighty empire's foundations. The Almoravid elite had grown wealthy and comfortable, abandoning the austere spirituality of their warrior origins. Their religious scholars followed the Maliki school of law with rigid interpretations that stifled theological inquiry. In the markets of Marrakech, wine flowed freely, and public morality declined despite Islamic prohibitions. The mosques displayed elaborate decorations that some considered contrary to the simplicity demanded by Islamic faith. Into this world of perceived corruption stepped a young Berber scholar named Muhammad ibn Tumart. Born around 1080 AD in the high Atlas Mountains, he belonged to the Masmuda tribe. His early life among the mountain Berbers instilled in him a passion for pure, monotheistic understanding. Around 1105 AD, Ibn Tumart left his mountain village to pursue religious education abroad. He traveled to Córdoba, then the greatest center of learning within the entire Almoravid dominion. Later, he journeyed eastward to Damascus, Baghdad, and Alexandria, studying under the greatest Islamic scholars. In Baghdad, he absorbed the teachings of Al-Ghazali and learned Ash'ari theological methods and reasoning. He also engaged with Mu'tazili theologians, whose rationalist approaches would influence his own developing thought. When Ibn Tumart returned to North Africa around 1117 AD, he carried revolutionary ideas. His central principle was an uncompromising interpretation of tawhid, the absolute unity of God Almighty. He argued that the Almoravids had fallen into anthropomorphism by attributing human-like qualities to God. This constituted shirk, the gravest sin in Islam, the association of partners or attributes with God. Ibn Tumart proclaimed that God possessed no separate attributes, but was one indivisible, transcendent essence. He rejected the subtle reasoning of Maliki jurists as dangerous innovations that obscured the Quran's message. He demanded a return to the Quran and Hadith as the sole legitimate sources of Islamic law. As he traveled through North African cities, he publicly denounced the immoral behavior he witnessed everywhere. He smashed wine jars in markets and confronted women who appeared in public without proper covering. His fiery sermons attracted devoted followers, but also earned him the enmity of Almoravid authorities everywhere. In Marrakech, he publicly criticized the Sultan himself, an act of extraordinary boldness and calculated defiance. The Almoravid authorities attempted to silence him, forcing Ibn Tumart to flee back to the Atlas Mountains. There, in the remote village of Tinmel around 1121 AD, he made his most momentous decision. Before his assembled followers, Ibn Tumart proclaimed himself the Mahdi, the divinely guided messianic leader. He claimed descent from the Prophet Muhammad through Fatima and Ali, establishing his religious authority completely. His followers began calling themselves al-Muwahhidun, those who affirmed tawhid, later rendered as Almohads. Ibn Tumart organized his community with remarkable sophistication, creating a hierarchical structure of unprecedented power. The Mahdi Ibn Tumart transformed his mountain refuge at Tinmel into a revolutionary state within a state. He established councils to govern his growing community, blending tribal organization with centralized religious authority. The Inner Council of 10 comprised his closest companions, serving as his privy council and advisors. The Consultative Council of 50 included leading sheikhs from the Masmuda tribes, ensuring broad tribal support. Ibn Tumart created a hierarchical classification of his followers based on when they joined his movement. The earliest companions, who gave their oath of loyalty first, received the highest status and privileges. Those who joined later occupied lower ranks in this carefully structured religious and quasi-social hierarchy. This organization mirrored the early Islamic community under the Prophet Muhammad, reinforcing Ibn Tumart's Mahdi claims. He taught his followers in their native Berber language as well as Arabic, making theology accessible. For many, Masmuda Berbers knew only rudimentary Islam, so Ibn Tumart's mission included extensive religious education. He composed foundational texts articulating his doctrines, emphasizing absolute tawhid as the cornerstone of faith. His writings included the A'azma Yutalab, a compilation of his sermons and theological teachings. These texts rejected anthropomorphic interpretations of divine attributes as incompatible with God's absolute unity and perfection. Ibn Tumart condemned the veneration of saints as a form of shirk that diluted pure monotheism. He criticized the Almoravid practice of allowing pilgrimages to saint tombs and seeking their intercession. This represented a fundamental challenge to popular religious practices deeply embedded in North African society. The Almoravids recognized the growing threat posed by this charismatic religious revolutionary in the mountains. In 1130 AD, the Almoravid Sultan Ali ibn Yusuf dispatched an army to crush the rebellion. Ibn Tumart led his followers down from Tinmel to attack Marrakech itself in a bold strategic gamble. The siege lasted approximately 40 days as Almohad warriors assaulted the massive walls of the capital, but the Almoravids rallied their forces and launched a devastating counterattack that shattered the Almohad assault. The Battle of Al-Buhaira proved disastrous for the Almohads, inflicting thousands of casualties upon them. Ibn Tumart, possibly wounded during the battle, retreated back to Tinmel with his defeated surviving followers. Shortly after this crushing defeat, in August 1130 AD, Muhammad ibn Tumart fell gravely ill. The Mahdi died without witnessing the spectacular victories his movement would achieve under his successor. Ibn Tumart's death could have destroyed the movement, yet his closest disciple ensured its survival. Abd al-Mu'min ibn Ali, a Berber from Algeria, had been Ibn Tumart's devoted companion since 1117. Though not a Masmuda tribesman, Abd al-Mu'min possessed extraordinary military talent and political acumen beyond measure. For 3 years, Ibn Tumart's lieutenants kept his death secret, a period called the occultation by chroniclers. This gave Abd al-Mu'min crucial time to consolidate his position and win the loyalty of wavering tribes. In 1133 AD, Abd al-Mu'min was officially proclaimed Caliph and commander of the faithful. He faced immediate challenges from rival claimants and skeptical tribal leaders who questioned his authority. But Abd al-Mu'min systematically eliminated rivals and brought wavering tribes back into the Almohad fold. In 1132 AD, he led a daring nighttime assault on the Almoravid fortress of Tasqimut. The fortress had been specifically designed to withstand prolonged sieges by large conventional attacking armies. Abd al-Mu'min avoided a lengthy siege by leading a small elite force to scale the walls. His warriors captured the gate under cover of darkness, allowing the main Almohad army to pour inside. The victory demonstrated Abd al-Mu'min's military genius and willingness to employ unorthodox tactical approaches. As a trophy, he had the fortress's grand gates removed and installed them at Tin Mel's entrance. Throughout the 1130s AD, Abd al-Mu'min systematically expanded Almohad control across the Moroccan countryside. He built a formidable army combining Mazmuda Berber warriors with recruits from his native Koumia tribe. Abd al-Mu'min relied heavily on Arab tribes, particularly the Hilalian families, to balance Mazmuda tribal power. These Arabs, whom he had initially defeated in battle, became integrated into the Almohad elite structure. They formed important contingents in the Almohad forces deployed across Ifriqiya and al-Andalus in campaigns. According to Andalusian historian Ibn Sahib al-Salat, Arab warriors received higher pay than other Almohad fighters. This integration of diverse tribal groups into a unified imperial army represented Abd al-Mu'min's political genius. By 1140 AD, the Almohads controlled much of central Morocco and were pressing toward Almoravid territories. In 1145 AD, Abd al-Mu'min captured the strategically vital city of Oran on the Mediterranean coast. The following year, in 1146 AD, he besieged Fez after a 9-month siege that exhausted defenders. The ancient capital of northern Morocco fell to the Almohads, marking a decisive turning point in the war. Abd al-Mu'min then turned toward Marrakech itself, the heart of Almoravid power in North Africa. The siege of Marrakech began in 1146 AD and lasted for 11 grueling months of combat. The Almoravid Sultan Ishaq ibn Ali defended desperately, but his warriors could not match Almohad determination. In 1147 AD, Marrakech finally fell to Abd al-Mu'min's relentless assault on the city. The last Almoravid Sultan was killed during the final battle, ending their dynasty's rule in North Africa. Abd al-Mu'min declared himself Caliph over all of Morocco, establishing the Almohad Caliphate as a reality. He ordered the destruction of Almoravid palaces and mosques, erasing symbols of the previous dynasty's rule. Yet he retained Marrakech as his capital, recognizing its strategic importance and established administrative infrastructure. The new caliph immediately began implementing Ibn Tumart's religious reforms with systematic thoroughness throughout Morocco. He enforced strict observance of Almohad doctrine, requiring public affirmation of Ibn Tumart as Mahdi. The Almohad creed became institutionalized in the Friday sermon recited in every mosque under their control. Non-Muslims faced intense pressure to convert to Islam or face exile or death under Abd al-Mu'min's decrees. During his siege of the Norman-held city of Mahdiya, Abd al-Mu'min declared that Christians must convert. Jews also faced persecution, with many forced to wear distinctive clothing if they converted to Islam superficially. The famous Jewish philosopher Maimonides fled the Almohad domains, settling eventually in Egypt for safety. Many Andalusian Christians emigrated northward to Christian kingdoms, escaping Almohad religious intolerance in the south. Yet this initial severity would moderate somewhat in later decades as pragmatism tempered religious ideology. Abd al-Mu'min faced a critical strategic choice: consolidate Morocco or immediately expand into Iberia. He chose to secure North Africa first, demonstrating patience and strategic wisdom beyond his years. In 1151 AD, he launched a massive expedition eastward toward Algeria and Tunisia's coastal cities. He conquered Constantine and fought a decisive battle near Sétif against a coalition of nomadic tribes. Rather than punishing these defeated Arab tribes, Abd al-Mu'min incorporated them into his imperial system. This pragmatic decision strengthened his dynasty against internal opposition from the Masmuda tribal families of Ibn Tumart. By 1159 AD, Abd al-Mu'min controlled all of the Maghreb from Tripolitania to Morocco's coast. For the first and last time in history, the entire Maghreb was unified under indigenous authority. With North Africa secure, Abd al-Mu'min turned his attention toward the vulnerable territories of al-Andalus. The Almoravid collapse had left Muslim Spain fragmented among weak Taifa kingdoms, unable to resist Christian advances. In the north, the Christian kingdoms of Castile, Leon, Aragon, and Portugal pressed southward relentlessly. King Alfonso VII of Castile had captured Toledo decades earlier, establishing a dangerous Christian presence deep south. Portuguese warriors under Afonso Henriques raided Muslim territories, capturing Santarém and Lisbon by 1147 AD. The fractious Muslim princes of Iberia sent desperate appeals to Abd al-Mu'min for assistance against Christians. In 1146 AD, even before conquering Marrakesh, Abd al-Mu'min had sent advance forces to Iberia. But he prioritized North African consolidation, only committing major forces to al-Andalus after 1160 AD. Between 1148 and 1172 AD, the Almohads gradually wrested control from remaining Almoravid governors. Abd al-Mu'min's son, Abu Yaqub Yusuf, who ruled from 1163 to 1184 AD, completed the conquest. In 1172 AD, Abu Yaqub Yusuf forced the surrender of Seville, the great Andalusian city. Seville became the new capital of Al-Andalus, replacing Córdoba as the center of Muslim Iberian power. The Almohads initiated an ambitious building program, constructing the magnificent Great Mosque of Seville immediately. Its minaret, the famous Giralda Tower, was erected in 1184 AD as a testament to power. The tower stood 77 meters tall, dominating the Sevillian skyline and proclaiming Almohad architectural genius worldwide. Meanwhile, Abd al-Mu'min established a sophisticated central government modeled on Andalusian administrative systems and practices. He imported Spanish Muslim officials to staff his bureaucracy, the Makhzan, bringing administrative expertise to Morocco. A comprehensive land registry was created to ensure regular tax revenue for the expanding imperial state. Abd al-Mu'min classified the Almohads into categories, imitating the Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab's early system. The highest incomes were reserved for the earliest companions of Ibn Tumart, who had given loyalty first. This ensured the loyalty of the movement's original supporters during the transition from rebellion to empire. Abd al-Mu'min appointed his sons as governors of principal provinces throughout the vast Almohad territories. Each son was accompanied by a leading Almohad sheikh as counselor, joining religious authority with dynastic power. In 1154 AD, Abd al-Mu'min proclaimed his son as his successor, establishing hereditary dynastic rule. This displaced Abu Hafs Umar, Ibn Tumart's companion, who had been the original designated successor as leader. The Mu'minid dynasty, named after Abd al-Mu'min, would rule the Almohad Empire for over a century. Abd al-Mu'min died in 1163 AD after ruling for 33 years as caliph and conqueror. His son Abu Yaqub Yusuf succeeded him smoothly, continuing his father's policies of expansion and consolidation. Under Abu Yaqub Yusuf, the Almohad Empire reached its zenith of territorial extent and cultural flourishing. He patronized philosophers and scholars, including the famous Ibn Tufayl, who served as court physician. In 1169 AD, Ibn Tufayl introduced the young jurist Ibn Rushd to the caliph at court. Abu Yaqub Yusuf commissioned Ibn Rushd to write commentaries on Aristotle's works, initiating a momentous project. These commentaries would eventually revolutionize European philosophy when translated into Latin centuries later after their completion. Ibn Rushd, known in the West as Averroes, became the most influential philosopher of medieval Islam. The Almohad court at Marrakesh and Seville became centers of intellectual activity unmatched in the era. Philosophers, physicians, mathematicians, and poets gathered under Almohad patronage, creating a golden age of learning. Abu Yaqub Yusuf died in 1184 AD while besieging the Portuguese city of Santarém. His son, Abu Yusuf Yaqub al-Mansur, succeeded him and would become the Almohad's greatest warrior caliph. Al-Mansur, whose name means the victorious, would live up to his title through spectacular battlefield triumphs. He immediately faced challenges in the eastern Maghreb from the Banu Ghanya, former allies of the Almoravids. By 1187 AD, Al-Mansur had defeated these rebels and reconquered Ifriqiya with decisive force. He then consolidated Almohad authority throughout North Africa, ensuring no region could challenge central power. Al-Mansur initiated massive architectural projects, including the construction of a new capital at Rabat. This city, called Ribat al-Fath, or Fortress of Victory, featured enormous walls encompassing vast urban areas. He began constructing the Hassan Mosque, intended to be the world's largest house of worship. The Hassan Tower was designed to reach 95 meters tall, surpassing all other minarets in the world. Construction began in 1191 AD, though the project remained unfinished after Al-Mansur's death in 1199. The tower's design mirrored the Koutoubia Mosque's minaret in Marrakesh and Seville's Giralda Tower perfectly. These three magnificent minarets represented the distinctive Almohad architectural style, with their square bases and proportions. In Iberia, Christian kingdoms continued their relentless pressure against Muslim territories throughout the 1180s and 90s. King Alfonso VIII of Castile had become the most aggressive Christian ruler, repeatedly raiding Almohad territories. In 1189 AD, Alfonso captured Silves from the Almohads with help from crusader fleets. Al-Mansur returned from North Africa in 1190 AD and successfully recaptured Silves after hard fighting. An armistice followed between the Almohads and the Christian kingdoms of Castile and Leon for several years. But in 1194 AD, Alfonso VIII violated the truce by invading the province of Seville. Al-Mansur, though suffering from illness in Marrakech, immediately prepared for a massive military campaign northward. On June 1, 1195 AD, the Caliph landed at Tarifa with his entire imperial army. His forces marched through Seville and reached Córdoba by June 30th, gathering reinforcements along the march. Alfonso VIII assembled his forces at Toledo and marched south to Alarcos near the Guadiana River. At Alarcos, an unfinished fortress marked the southern boundary of the Kingdom of Castile's territorial claims. Alfonso did not wait for reinforcements from King Alfonso IX of Leon or Sancho VII of Navarre. On July 16, 1195 AD, the massive Almohad army came into view of the Castilian positions. Al-Mansur did not attack immediately, preferring to rest his warriors after their long march northward. Early on July 18th, the Almohad army formed for battle around a small hill called La Cabeza. The Caliph's vizier Abu Yahya ibn Abi Hafs commanded the powerful center with volunteers from Bani Marin. Arab forces under Yarmun ibn Riyah held the right wing, while Andalusian warriors under Ibn Sanadid held left. Al-Mansur himself commanded the reserve, which included the elite Black Guard and the best Almohad warriors. The Castilian knights charged with tremendous force, their heavy cavalry smashing through the Almohad first lines. For 3 hours, the battle raged under the intense July heat as Christian knights pushed forward. But the Arab cavalry began enveloping the Castilian flanks, threatening to surround the Christian forces completely. Then Al-Mansur unleashed his reserves, the Caliph himself clearly visible fighting in the front ranks. The Castilian knights found themselves surrounded on all sides, subjected to withering arrow volleys from above. Alfonso VIII fought hand-to-hand until his bodyguards forcibly removed him from battle and fled toward Toledo. The Castilian infantry was annihilated, along with most of the warriors from the Calatrava Knights Order. The Battle of Alarcos on July 18, 1195 AD, became one of history's most decisive battles. The Castilian field army was destroyed, with thousands of knights and warriors killed in the fighting. 3 bishops perished in the slaughter, those of Avila, Segovia, and Sigüenza, along with numerous counts. The Lord of Vizcaya, Diego López de Haro, managed to reach Alarcos fortress with a few survivors. Approximately 3,000 people trapped inside the castle faced certain death or capture by Almohad forces. Pedro Fernández de Castro, a Castilian nobleman who had fought for the Almohads, negotiated their surrender. The survivors were allowed to leave in exchange for 12 knights held hostage and a massive ransom. All nearby Christian castles surrendered or were abandoned: Malagon, Benavente, Calatrava, Caracuel, and Torre de Guadalferza. The road to Toledo lay open before the victorious Almohad army, threatening Castile's very heartland, but Al-Mansur withdrew to Seville, having suffered considerable casualties himself, despite his overwhelming victory today. For the next 2 years, Almohad forces devastated Extremadura, the Tagus Valley, and La Mancha systematically. They raided as far as the area around Toledo itself, demonstrating their complete dominance over Castile. Alfonso VIII of Castile had been so thoroughly defeated that he became a vassal in humiliation. The victory at Alarcos secured Almohad control over al-Andalus for another 17 crucial years afterward. Al-Mansur's Almohad diplomacy obtained an alliance with Alfonso IX of Leon, who was enraged with Castile. The Leonese king had been furious that Alfonso VIII had not waited for his reinforcements before battle. Alfonso IX of Leon, with Almohad and Navarrese support, actually declared war against Castile in revenge. This Christian disunity prevented any coordinated response to the Almohad threat for nearly 2 decades afterward. The Battle of Alarcos represented the high watermark of Islamic power in the Iberian Peninsula's medieval history. Al-Mansur's reign from 1184 to 1199 AD was the golden age of power. The Almohad Empire now stretched from Libya in the east to the Atlantic Ocean in the west. From al-Andalus in the north to the Sahara Desert in the south, one caliph ruled supreme. The empire controlled the western Mediterranean, dominating both shores of the Strait of Gibraltar strategically. Al-Mansur built a powerful navy that could project Almohad power throughout the Mediterranean Sea effectively. He was the last Muslim Mediterranean power to maintain a fleet worthy of confronting Christian naval forces. In 1189 AD, the great Ayyubid Sultan Saladin requested Almohad naval assistance against the Crusaders. Al-Mansur declined, focusing his military efforts on the Iberian Peninsula rather than the distant Levant. The Almohad court became a center of unprecedented cultural and intellectual activity during Al-Mansur's enlightened reign. The caliph himself was deeply interested in philosophy, astronomy, and theological debates among learned scholars. He patronized the philosopher Ibn Rushd, who served as both court physician and chief judge of Córdoba. Ibn Rushd completed his monumental commentaries on Aristotle under Al-Mansur's generous patronage and royal protection. His medical treatise, the Kulliyat fi al-Tibb, became a standard textbook throughout Europe for centuries. Another philosopher, Ibn Tufayl, wrote his famous philosophical novel Hayy ibn Yaqdan at the Almohad court. Poets, mathematicians and astronomers gathered in Marrakesh and Seville, creating a brilliant, intellectual flowering unprecedented in scope. The Koutoubia Mosque in Marrakesh was completed during Al-Mansur's reign, its minaret becoming an architectural icon. Standing 77 meters tall, the Koutoubia minaret established the template for later Moroccan and Andalusian architecture. Its design influenced religious architecture throughout the Western Islamic world for centuries to come afterward. Almohad architecture combined austere simplicity with mathematical precision and subtle decorative elements throughout their constructions. Abu Yusuf Yaqub al-Mansur died in 1199 AD, leaving the empire at its zenith. His son, Muhammad al-Nasir, succeeded him as caliph, inheriting an empire of unmatched power and prestige. The new caliph was only 19 years old when he ascended to leadership of the Almohad state. Al-Nasir continued his father's policies initially, maintaining the empire's territorial extent and administrative efficiency throughout regions. But by 1212 AD, Christian kingdoms in Iberia had recovered from their defeats at Alarcos. Pope Innocent III proclaimed a crusade against the Almohads, calling Christian Europe to arms against Islam. French knights, Knights Templars, and warriors from across Christendom converged on Toledo in spring 1212. King Alfonso VIII of Castile, burning for revenge after 17 years, led the Christian coalition forces. King Sancho VII of Navarre and Peter II of Aragon joined him with their kingdom's armies. King Alfonso IX of Leon refused to participate, maintaining his alliance with the Almohads against Castile. In June 1212 AD, the combined Christian army marched south toward the Sierra Morena Mountains. Al-Nasir assembled his forces at Jaén, gathering warriors from across the entire vast Almohad Empire. His army included contingents from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and al-Andalus, representing imperial power united completely. The Caliph positioned his forces in the plain of Las Navas de Tolosa on July 16 AD. He intended to block the Christian advance through the mountain passes toward Andalusia's heartland cities. Initially, the Christians struggled to find a route through the heavily guarded mountain passes before them. According to legend, a local shepherd guided them to an alternate route that bypassed the Almohad defenses. On July 16, 1212 AD, the two massive armies clashed in one of history's decisive battles. The Almohad center held firm initially, their warriors fighting with courage against the Christian knightly charges. But King Sancho VII of Navarre led his mounted knights through gaps in the Almohad lines. They charged directly at al-Nasir's command position, where the Caliph was surrounded by his Black Guard. After fierce hand-to-hand combat, the Almohad lines broke and the warriors began retreating in disorder everywhere. Al-Nasir fled the battlefield, abandoning his camp and treasures to the victorious Christian forces. The defeat at Las Navas de Tolosa shattered Almohad prestige and military power throughout the empire. Christian losses were relatively light, approximately 2,000 warriors, while Almohad casualties numbered in tens of thousands. Al-Nasir returned to Marrakesh in disgrace and locked himself in his palace until his death. He died in 1213 AD, possibly from illness or despair over the catastrophic defeat he suffered. His young son, 10-year-old Yusuf Thekun al-Mustansir, succeeded him under a regency of competing nobles. The Almohad Empire entered a period of internal strife and competing claimants to the caliphate's throne. In 1224 AD, the young Caliph Yusuf II died without naming a successor or heir. The ensuing power struggle saw various members of the Mu'minid dynasty claiming the title of caliph. Rebellions erupted across the empire as provincial governors and tribal leaders sensed central weakness and opportunity. In Al-Andalus, Christian kingdoms pressed their advantage with relentless campaigns of conquest throughout the Iberian south. Ferdinand III of Castile captured Córdoba in 1236 AD, ending Muslim rule over the ancient capital. Valencia fell to James I of Aragon in 1238 AD after a prolonged siege. In 1248 AD, Seville itself, the Almohad capital of Al-Andalus, surrendered to Ferdinand III. The magnificent Giralda minaret was converted into a cathedral bell tower, symbolizing Christianity's triumph in Iberia. By 1252 AD, only the small kingdom of Granada remained under Muslim control in Iberia. In North Africa, the Almohad Empire fragmented as regional dynasties declared independence from Marrakech's weakening authority. The Hafsid dynasty seized power in Tunis in 1236 AD, establishing independent rule over Ifriqiya. The Abd al-Wadid dynasty captured Tlemcen in 1239 AD, controlling central Algeria thereafter completely. Meanwhile, a new Berber confederation called the Marinids began rising in power throughout northern Morocco's territories. The Marinids were Zenata Berbers who had served as warriors in the Almohad armies for decades. They gradually conquered Almohad territories in Morocco, taking advantage of the dynasty's internal weakness and fragmentation. In 1244 AD, a late Almohad pretender named Idris al-Ma'mun formally renounced Almohad doctrine entirely. He publicly rejected Ibn Tumar's status as Mahdi, attempting to gain support from conservative religious scholars. This repudiation of the empire's founding ideology fatally undermined any remaining legitimacy the dynasty possessed completely. By this time, Almohad territory had shrunk to little more than the city of Marrakech itself. The last Almohad Caliph, Idris al-Wathiq, ruled only Marrakech and faced constant threats from the Marinids. In 1269 AD, a slave murdered Idris al-Wathiq, ending the Almohad dynasty after 139 years. The Marinids immediately seized Marrakech, bringing the Almohad Empire to its final conclusion in history forever. The Almohad legacy, however, far outlasted the dynasty itself in multiple profound ways across North Africa. Their architectural achievements remain among the most magnificent monuments of Islamic civilization to this day worldwide. The Koutoubia Mosque in Marrakech, with its iconic minaret, still dominates the city skyline after centuries. The Giralda Tower in Seville, though now a cathedral bell tower, preserves Almohad architectural genius forever. The Hassan Tower in Rabat stands as an unfinished testament to Al-Mansur's ambitious building projects. These square minarets with their distinctive proportions influenced mosque architecture throughout Morocco and beyond for centuries. The Almohad emphasis on geometric decoration and mathematical precision shaped Moroccan artistic traditions permanently thereafter. Intellectually, the Almohad period represented one of the greatest flowerings of Islamic philosophy in history worldwide. Ibn Rushd's commentaries on Aristotle became foundational texts for European medieval and Renaissance philosophy completely. Thomas Aquinas, the great Christian theologian, engaged extensively with Ibn Rushd's arguments in his writings. Jewish philosophy was profoundly influenced by the intellectual climate of Almohad al-Andalus, despite religious persecution. Moses Maimonides, though forced to flee, developed his philosophical system partly in response to Almohad thought. The Almohad emphasis on tawhid influenced later Islamic reform movements seeking to purify religious practice. Their attempt to unify North Africa under one authority demonstrated both the possibilities and limits of power. The Almohad experience showed that military conquest alone cannot sustain an empire without continuous adaptive governance. Their initial religious intolerance drove away skilled Jewish and Christian populations, weakening the empire's economic foundation. Later, Almohad rulers recognized this error and attempted to reverse policies, but the damage was done. The empire's reliance on the Muminid family for all positions of authority prevented broader power-sharing arrangements. When the dynasty weakened, there were no alternative power structures to maintain imperial cohesion across territories. The defeat at Las Navas de Tolosa demonstrated that even the greatest empires face limits of power. The Almohads had united North Africa and Iberia, but they could not permanently hold both regions. Their two-front struggle against Christian kingdoms and North African rebels ultimately proved impossible to sustain long-term. Yet for over a century, the Almohads created one of history's most impressive empires politically. They proved that theological reform could serve as the foundation for imperial power when combined with talent. Their legacy reminds us that faith, when mobilized effectively, can transform societies and reshape entire regions permanently. The Almohad Empire rose from the Atlas Mountains to challenge the greatest powers of medieval Europe. Their warriors crushed Christian armies at Alarcos, demonstrating that Islamic power remained formidable in the 12th century. Founded on the theological principle of tawhid, the Almohads created a unique synthesis of faith and power. They unified North Africa for the first and only time under indigenous authority in all recorded history. Their architectural legacy endures in the magnificent minarets that still tower over Marrakesh, Seville, and Rabat. The philosophers they patronized, particularly Ibn Rushd, shaped European intellectual development for centuries to come. Though the empire ultimately fell to internal divisions and external pressures, its impact resonates through history. The Almohad story reveals how religious reform movements can transform into political forces of extraordinary power. It demonstrates both the possibilities and limits of empire building across diverse regions and populations over time. Their emphasis on strict monotheism influenced later Islamic reform movements seeking to purify religious practice worldwide. The Almohads proved that Berber peoples could create sophisticated civilizations rivaling any contemporary power in scope. Their legacy in architecture, philosophy, and political organization continues to fascinate historians and scholars to this day. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history and learned something new about the Almohads, please like this video. Subscribe to Unleash Facts to continue supporting our work, creating comprehensive historical documentaries that bring the past alive. Your support helps us research thoroughly and present history with accuracy, depth, and engaging storytelling for audiences worldwide. Thank you for watching this exploration of the Almohad Empire, the Islamic superpower that challenged Europe itself.